Hello, everybody. It's Tim Otitoju again with Conversations with Tim Otitoju. It's now 2024. It's been a while since we've shot a podcast, and I'm excited to bring another guest that we've had on before to talk to us today. As you know, this podcast is about talking to leaders and entrepreneurs, sharing their journey, and with hopes to inspire you to become a leader yourself or to get into entrepreneurship or to be a better leader or a better entrepreneur. And today we have the pleasure of having Darci Lang with us. She's a motivational speaker. She's an author, an entrepreneur. Last time we talked, I think it was back in 2021. We were just kind of chatting about that offline here. And since then, you've done so much since then, right? So I think the
Yes.
last time we were talking about focusing on the 90%. And since then, you've got Lead the 90%, you've got Living the 90%. There's many other books that you've written since then. So I thought it was a good idea to bring you back on so we can hear a bit more about what you've been doing and maybe dive more into the leadership part of things. So Darci, I'd like to welcome you to today's podcast. How are you doing?
Thank you, Tim. Oh, blessed. My favorite line is, with all I can control, I'm great. Because I think life has a whole bunch of uncontrollable 10%, as I like to call them. But with all the 90% boxes that we check off, healthy, employed, warm home, safe country, food in the fridge, life's good.
No.
Life is good, Tim.
Oh, that's awesome. Talking about warm homes, the last week it's been like minus 50. So
All
we're
right,
really blessed to have a warm home because, not everybody can say that, right?
oh,
So
Tim.
definitely we have to count our blessings for sure.
Absolutely. And I think it's fitting that we talk about that right up front, that I believe we really need to learn to train our brains to see more of that and to see more of what is good. Life is really, really hard. And being a leader is hard, being an entrepreneur is hard. It's really, life has all kinds of 10%, but the purpose of life is to get through those 10% and get to the other side of them so that we can live our big, beautiful lives. But I think we really need to learn to train our brain to do that because not everybody grew up, not everybody was trained how to do that. People's traumas and experiences affect how they view the world. So I'd love to share with your listeners and viewers how to start training the brain early in 2024 to start to be a little bit more grateful because we are so blessed to live here and have all we have.
That's awesome. I can't wait. I would say in today's landscape, you go on social media, there's so much negativity around it, and it seems people are focusing more on that 10%, right? And sometimes I find myself going down that rabbit hole, and then I kind of remember your book focusing on the 90%, right? I look around me and I'm like, yeah, and I say to myself, I'm healthy, my family's healthy, we can put food on the table, we have a roof over our head, like let's focus on the positives instead of letting the 10% negative consume us. So your book always comes to mind anytime I find myself going down the rabbit hole. But, you've written a book called Lead the 90%. What inspired you to write that book?
I'll add to what you just said first, Tim, and I'll happily answer that question. I think the gift we give a broken world, Tim, is a human being that sees the 90%. Like for us to be love and light, to find what's good, go spread that love and light in the world, to me, that is how you change a broken world. I don't think you change a broken world by doom scrolling. I think you change it by saying, this is the world. What can I do? This person in the mirror, the only thing I can control in a completely uncontrollable world, what can I do to bring my best self forth? So that's how I believe we heal the broken world. And secondly, let me tell you about this lead. So to add to your comment at the beginning of the podcast, yes, so blessed. You and I talked in COVID, and COVID, of course, had many real, not glossing over, very difficult 10%. But it gave me an opportunity to be off the road. This is
Yeah.
my 30th year speaking this year. 31 it'll be this year. It was
Wow.
30 last year. And in all my 30 years, I've never been landlocked like that. So I was able to be home, and I'm very blessed. Tim, I know we're God people, and God downloads books to me. So I get these really cool inspirations, and then I start getting a download of a book. So I already had them in the computer. It was just timely that I
Yeah.
had a couple of years off of travel. So yes, you and I talked about my first book, Focus on the 90%, the last time. I wrote a second part two book called Living the 90%, 9 Ways to Be Happier. I wrote a woman's book called Embrace the 90%, How to
Wow.
Slay Fear, Defy Your Labels, and Love Yourself. But today, my fourth book, which you and I talked about, and I'm excited to share today, is Lead the 90%. And this is my leadership book called Kind Leadership. I'm going to tell you, Tim, how this book came about. So, because I have been blessed beyond to speak for 30 years, I've been invited virtually or live to an event every week, spring and fall, for 30 years. So I've had the privilege of meeting leaders week after week in every imaginable industry across the country and now virtually across the world. And what's been really unique, Tim, is I kept track for all these years. Every time I met a leader, and I still do, every time I meet a leader, I keep track of what made them great and what made them not so great. And then I compiled that. And again, with the gift of time off during COVID, I wrote, not only did I write my findings, but what made the great great and the not so great great, I also interviewed the top 20 leaders I met in my career. So
Wow.
I couldn't wait to write this book. It was so divinely timely. Like, the world needs it. It's called Lead the 90%, but my tag, as you have from your book there, as you see, is kind leadership, because I think kindness is the most important thing in the world. And I think, again, to add to what we said at the beginning, to help a broken world, to have people who are kinder to those that they lead, that would be life changing.
That's amazing. When I was going through your book, the one thing that I found that was different from the last one I read that we talked about was the quotes from the different leaders that were there, right?
Yes.
Some of them talking about people that were their mentors or talking about leadership styles and things like that. And as I was reading it, I started thinking, when I started thinking about the leaders that stuck out in my mind, right? There was
Right.
definitely some that stuck out for positive reasons, because they had an impact on me in one way or the other. But there's the one that I could think about the most is what not to do, right? I remember we were in, I think it was in France. Yeah, it was in France. We were in France, and we were on a project with the university. And we were going to different organizations and sitting down with their leaders. And we went into a big company. They're a well-known company. Everybody orders and gets stuff delivered all around the world, but from them. And I remember sitting there talking to one of their leaders. He had 3,500 people that he managed. And the way he talked, we all looked at each other when we were done. And, we had a room full of leaders as well, right? Some of them are CEOs, COO of big organizations. And when we got back in the bus, we're like, this is not how you lead, right? There was no kindness that was coming out, right? And that sticks with you, right? That sticks with you, whether it's a really good, impactful leader that's positive in your life or a really negative one, it sticks with you. For me, I would rather be the kind one that
Oh,
people remember, right?
agreed. And I challenge people at the beginning of my book to be at your retirement function, right? And imagine your staff, your team members coming up and saying something about you. How proud will you be as you sit at that retirement function? And that's how I live my life. Is I'm not perfect, Tim. I've made mistakes. I'm not the perfect leader by any stretch. I'm not insinuating that. But those that have I've been led poorly by in my past, or leaders that I felt led poorly, those were great lessonings for me as well. It's what I don't want to be. But what I do want to be is kind. And if people don't think being kind is important, then I say to them, you've never been led by somebody unkind. Because all you need is one experience of being led by somebody unkind for you to realize, oh yeah, kind's just about everything. And a lot of people challenge the title of the book and said, well, kindness makes you weak. I
Nope.
say, I think a raging narcissist is a far weaker personality than somebody who can show up grounded, kind, smiling, remember your name, uses please and thank yous, makes me as a speaker. Like, it's really unique, Tim. I'm invited every week to your company. I'm a guest.
Mhm.
And I've had leaders treat me like I'm some hired person and no regard for me. And then what does that do at the barbecue on the weekend when my friends say, how was that place? Because I'm guessing, Tim, you've told the story you just told me about meeting that person in France more than once.
Yep.
So it's very important that we remember, like, we are walking billboards. We really are for what we do. And for all the clients that I meet that are talking about retention and retaining people and attracting people to their company, I say one of the greatest retention and attraction campaigns is to have all of your leaders go out into the community and be the kindest people in the world. Because the world is, we live in a small city,
Mhm.
Tim, everybody knows everybody. The world is watching you. And my adult children will not work for anybody who's unkind. It's not just because they're my kid. That generation, they won't work for anybody unkind. They won't. They leave, they quit. You and I stayed, and we put up with it. They will not put up with it. So it is time in a world that demands inclusion, diversity, compassion, empathy, and understanding. We better start figuring out how to show up kinder humans.
That is so true. That is so true. Now, one question for you is, a lot of the people in the leadership position are people that are in our generation, right?
Yeah.
And like you said, we stayed, right? Like if we worked for an unkind boss or leader, we stayed because we needed the money, needed to feed the
Right.
family, stuff like that, right? But the new generation is not. Now, sometimes people's leadership skills is based on the leader that led them. So how do you break that cycle, right? How do you become that kind leader if you've never had a kind leader?
It's the same way you become a kind parent if you didn't have a kind parent. You learn how to do it better and different. And I think the conscious choice to say, I want to be a better human and I want to be a nicer leader who leaves a legacy, because the ripple of you not being kind ripples out, as we talked about offline. If people are unkind, and it starts with the person in the mirror, maybe I should set this up a little bit better, Tim, but it all starts with the person in the mirror. There is not a single leader that I interviewed for this book that has not done enormous, enormous personal and professional development work on the person in the mirror. So to me, that's where it starts. You have to make a conscious decision. I want to be a kinder human. But people who have to make that decision are the same the decision they have to make to want to be a better parent, to want to be a better spouse, partner. You have to decide the payoff is greater for you in the end than not doing it. Because the payoff is you have happy employees who treat customers better, you make more money.
Mhm.
But it all starts with you. And so that's what I wanted to talk about a little bit too is how do you get there? How do you make this conscious decision? So may I talk about that a little bit?
Oh, for sure. Go for it.
Okay, great. So the first thing I want to talk about is we touched on it at the beginning here is training the brain. So the first thing I think we need to do, take a look, challenge the person in the mirror on how we think and how we talk. So to start right there to say, am I a person, as we talked about when we came on, who sees the warm home and the sunshine and all the things minus, we don't talk about minus 30, the thing we can't control, the 10%, we talk about the thing that we can. And in order to train the brain, there's a couple of things that I do, Tim, that have changed my life. And I want to say before I tell you this train the brain idea that it's this next generation will not work for old, tired, unhappy dictator narcissists. They won't. They won't. They will not do it. Those days are long gone. So we have to make it. And my goal in life, Tim, is to feel 20 years younger. I'm 54, and my goal in life is to feel 20 years younger than I am, because they will not work for old, tired people who do not emulate what they want. I want my team to be happy, live a beautiful life, deal with their personal problems. As I said in the intro, get through their 10% in life in any way I can love and support them so they can live their beautiful life. But the biggest challenge is, Tim, am I? And when my friends say my staff are not happy, I say, are you? Are you showing them what it looks like to be kind to the person in the mirror? So your behavior, not your words, show them how to do that. And so a way that I've harnessed my brain, like you, I've done a lot of personal development work, read a ton of books, podcasts, TED Talks, YouTube videos. How do you do it? You stop scrolling and you look at whatever you read, watch, or surround yourself with and say, is this going to make me a better leader? And it doesn't make me a better leader, Tim, to sit around with leaders who complain about their life. It makes me a better leader to hang out with leaders who are constantly invested in the person in the mirror. That's all you got to change. You don't need to change your staff. You don't need to change your customers. You need to change how you show up in the world, and everything else miraculously starts to fall into place. So I had to train the brain. I do it like this. I imagine that I have a shepherd stick, a big imaginary shepherd stick shaped like a magnifying glass, of course, because that's my motto. And I learned to train my brain because I had a very trauma-filled childhood. I write a lot about that in my women's book. I've had lots of real life 10%. Again, life's hard. Life's hard. But I have learned in the day to be a fully present human. I take my thoughts and then my 10% fear-based, non-worthiness, questioning me thoughts, and I have learned to shepherd them over. So really negative fear-based thoughts are really fear. Really what they are is fear. And I don't know about you, Tim, but people tell me one thought in the morning can ruin their whole day. What? Thoughts are a thing. So let's learn to train them. So I take out my magnifying glass shaped shepherd stick, negative thoughts come in, I shepherd them over. I say, thank you so much, appreciate the thought, but right now I'm going on a podcast with Tim. I got to see what shirt he's wearing because he has the best clothes ever. So I'm going to hang out with Tim. I'm excited to talk. Thanks anyway. And I shepherd them over. And I do this all day. I've done 30 years of intensive work on the woman in the mirror. And even then, I've learned there's 10% of the brain that still tries to hijack me. And I just learned to love her and live with her. So I shepherd them over. But the key, Tim, is if you don't deal with those negative thoughts in the day, I allow myself morning silence, lunch silence, and silence after supper. Because if you don't, you know when those thoughts will show up? When you lay down at bed at night. So you'll lay down for restorative sleep, which is sanity. And one of my 4 go-tos in life: sleep, exercise, nutrition, and meditation, non-negotiables for me to be rested, nourished, spiritually, mentally, physically, and spiritually, fully here for you. I can't sleep if I haven't allowed myself this gorgeous silence in the day. And I'm a busy woman, not you're busy too. But I don't eat my lunch, blah. I eat my lunch in the sun with the sun streaming through, blessing my beautiful food, and I let my thoughts come in and I deal with them in little points in the day, Tim. Does that make sense? Yeah. So then I can be fully here. That is why when I meet leaders who aren't listening to a thing I'm saying, who are going through the motions, who misspell my name, who interrupt, who didn't remember a thing that I said, it's because they've got all these they're not fully here. It's because the thoughts are there. So I've learned to shepherd them, be fully present. And as a leader, to sit in front of someone that you are leading and to be able to be a fully present human like that, or with your client, they'll sense the difference. But here's the key, Tim, is that if I leave those sheep in the field, they will become wolves and they will become thoughts that destroy you. So I spend time every Saturday morning. I get up, candles, rescue pets, fireplace on, and every Saturday morning, all by myself, I journal out the thoughts. And may I keep going with how else I extrapolate this? Okay. So then because I'm on this intensive self-awareness journey of, you remember from our last podcast, I have a 3 times complain rule.
Yes.
I don't complain about anything more than 3 times. So if leaders are complaining about something in their, the way for themselves or someone with their team or the way their business is running or the way their clients are responding, I challenge you to only do that 3 times. Get it out, get some air on it, vent it with your friends. But then I have a lay that sucker out meeting and I lay the challenge out. It's very important that we do not carry around these 10% thoughts because they manifest themselves in the way we treat ourselves. The way you eat, what you read, what you watch, who you surround yourself with is indicative of how you feel about you. So when you've looked after the person in the mirror, you make healthier choices. So Saturday morning, I write out all the 10% thoughts that came all week because there's a theme and they're usually kind of the same. And then at the end of the year, Tim, I take that notebook and I make a theme for the next year. So may I give you an example?
Yes.
Or did you want to jump in? I'm talking a lot.
I want to hear your example. I'm listening.
Okay.
I'm learning.
Okay. You get a motivational speaker on the podcast. Look what
There you
happens, right?
go.
So
Yes.
every year, rather, and this is very timely with it being January, every year I do a theme. So rather than New Year's resolutions, with no disrespect, I don't find most people keep them. I do a theme instead. And the theme, Tim, is based on the 10% thoughts of the year before. So every year the theme is that comes up with a word that has something to do with healing the thing that I kept coming up over and over and over again. So I'll give you this year, just in the interest of time. This year my theme is grow. So every year I buy myself a new ring to reflect my theme. This year it has a green stone for growth, and I have a new ring every year to look down at every single day to remind me, is what I'm about to do going to help me grow as a human? Does that
Amazing.
make sense?
Yep.
But that word, the theme, came out of what did I need to do? I needed to grow. I had a rough year last year. It was a really rough year. My assistant of 30 years passed away. We had difficult times in our home, difficult times in our extended family. And my theme last year was show up. And I showed up and gave everything I had. So this year, I need to grow past some of it because I was stuck a little bit in dealing with life. Now I get to grow up spiritually, mentally, physically, spiritually. So that's what I recommend leaders and entrepreneurs do. Spend soulful, reflective time. Do I have time? Of course not, Tim. But
You
do
have
I
to
have
make
time
time.
not to?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have to make time.
Spend soulful, reflective time with the most important in the world, the one who stares back, person in the world that stares back at you in the mirror. Figure out how come I don't have 5 minutes in the morning. Start eliminating the things I'm complaining about that are taking me away from that. And what could I do, entrepreneur and leader, to be the best version of myself? And then lead from there. Because I think we leaders are taught these weird self-servient things that we are to serve and have nothing left for us. What? What? And then you're leading from a depleted place, and you're leading depleted people who have huge, enormous lives themselves with addictions and mental health and family problems and all the things that humans have. What gift would you give your team if you are self-aware enough to know my greatest 10% is this, and I'm going to spend the whole year healing it? What a witness you would be to your team. What a
Wow.
witness.
That's amazing. The one thing that I kept coming back to as you were talking is that a leader cannot give something he or she doesn't have, right? Like you said, if you're completely depleted and your cup is not full, you can't fill other people's cups. So taking that time to reflect and that time to deal with any 10% thoughts that you may have is absolutely important. And as you were talking about I guess your theme for the year is growth. The funny thing is that my theme for the year is right around that too. And the way that I come up with my theme is usually my wife and I will sit down at the beginning of the year and we kind of reflect back to the previous year and kind of see, what has gone right and what needs improvements. And looking back at 2023, the main thing for me is that there was so many things that I want to do, right? There was just so many things and so many ideas in my mind. I'm a dreamer. I'm always dreaming big.
Mm,
I want to
mm.
implement different things, right? So then this year, the theme that I came up for myself for 2024 is focused growth,
Love it.
right? As because I'm always looking for a way to grow. But in 2024, I need to focus and make sure that I grow in the right places, right? So,
I love
so
it.
it's a few years ago that we stopped doing the, hey, this is what my 2024 goal list are, things like that, and we started coming up with themes as well. So it's kind of great to kind of see that other people are doing that as well from that perspective. But back to the book. In one of the areas of the book, you talked about, I think it was like 9 perspectives, and it has something to do with emails and your tone of voice and things like that. Can you go through that with us for leaders?
Sure. I think I'll summarize that whole chapter for you then to say, where could you add kindness? Where else can you add kindness? So again, to recap, I really believe it starts with the person in the mirror. You said it. I don't think we have street cred with our team if, again, we're not the example of what we want them to be. And if you are up in front of your team asking them to be something that you are literally not, they're not buying into your message at all. They're
Yep.
all rolling their eyes like, yeah, well, as soon as you do it, we'll do it. So that's important. But then to add to what you said about the 9 is I want people to just look at what they do all day and ask, how could I add some layers of kindness? I can't tell you how many people, leaders will send me an email with their meeting planner or their reception who is in charge of the convention, send Darci the agenda. No, please. No, thank you. I can't tell you how many times I have watched a leader walk by someone at a front desk and be rude. How many leaders I've seen get up in front of their team, mispronounce people's names who've worked for them for 3 or 4 years. Like, get it right. So, how could you add genuine kindness to everything that you do? The please and thank yous go a long way, Tim. And people say, I'm too busy to do this people stuff. Well, if you're not doing the people stuff, I'm good at the hard skills. I just want to do this. I just want to build. I just want to ship. So do I. All I want to do is speak. But I have this whole network of people around me who need love. And
Yes.
if I need to get out and speak, I'm going to do it. It's going to be a lot easier for me if the people around me feel loved by a kind human. Very hard for me to do if I haven't looked after the woman in the mirror. This isn't a genuine place you're leading from now. It's the, I went to the seminar, she told me to be this, I'll be this. And people will email me and say, I can tell you my boss went to your seminar today because they were nice to me all week.
So it lasts a week.
So that didn't work, did it, Tim? It
No.
didn't work. And so that's the point of that chapter, the 9 that you're speaking of, is really look at how proud are you of how kind, because you'll be known as unkind otherwise. And it's from those simple things. The please, I even watch I never say no without thank you. I never say yes without please. Just little things that I can add. My assistant and I worked together for 30 years, and there wasn't one text, email, or message I sent her that did not have a please and a thank you attached to it.
Wow.
So I don't know, Tim, maybe it sounds Pollyanna in a world that needs more than that, but I think it would change the world if people would show up at work and look around and say, how can I bring kindness? Throwing a Christmas party and a patterned mug their way, that's important and very important for many of us who've never had that. It's just as important to add little bits to emails and correspondence and be love. I would rather people blow their entire Christmas budget up and individually love people up, but that's me.
You know, I always, I talk to different leaders, and different leaders have different leadership styles, right? Some would say, hey, in order to motivate your employees to work and be productive, you've got to set these big goals and things like that. I appreciate that, because then there's accountability. You can go back and look at the KPIs and things like that. But if they're doing it grudgingly, um, they're not going to put in that extra. But if you lead with kindness and they see that you genuinely are interested in them and you genuinely appreciate the work that they do, they want to go that extra mile for you. You know, no one is going to go that extra mile for someone that is not kind, or someone that they can't resonate with, or someone that just doesn't see them more than just a number on that checkerboard, right? So I mean, from
Agreed.
that, as I was reading your book, I was just thinking about that last night because I stayed up last night reading your book, and I was
Thank you.
thinking about that last night, and I was like, like yeah, like leading from a place of kindness can also lead to things like productivity, right? Can lead to motivation, and people even turnover rates can end up being lower. There's so many benefit uh, for it, not just about the numbers, not just about the money alone, right? There's so much benefit that can come from it because people feel valued.
Agreed. And so what's unique to me, like you'll leave the legacy. What legacy would you like to leave? Not one of the leaders that I interviewed, Tim, were not ragingly successful. This is not does not make you weak and small to be kind. You have such a team following you behind you. So no, I believe it's so incredibly important. And you made a very good point. They will follow. What's unique to me too is say you have a CEO of an organization and they will feature them on the media. Wow, and they were actually kind. Or you have a star, some celebrity movie star, and then you find out, wow, they're actually kind. And everybody's so enthralled by that. Isn't that ridiculous? So
It
you
should be the
can't, so,
norm.
right. So because you're raging successful, you're not automatically unkind and egotistical. That's ridiculous. Well, that's ridiculous. Like if you're from a serving place like you and I are, Tim, if you're truly here to serve the greater good, you got to start with serving the person in the mirror, as I've said, but then you've got to look at your team first. How many CEOs I met got up in front of everybody, and I'm an energy person, Tim, so I read energy, and sometimes I'd see the leader get up, and I'd be like, "Oh, sit down. You are doing way more harm than good up there, telling everybody how much you care about them when you clearly don't." And how often a leader would get up and talk about profits and their customers and numbers, and then way at the bottom, they're people. And I have been a fly on the wall at the back of the room, waiting to be invited up front to speak for 30 years, listening to the table rustlings. And people do not appreciate being fourth on the list of priorities of what's important to us this year. What's important is your people.
Mhm.
That's it. And everything else will flow from that. When people say we have morale issues, I say, okay, that means you have a pocket of unhappy people that you need to really try to work with to see why they're unhappy. They might be your greatest teachers.
Wow.
They might be.
True that. True that. One thing I was thinking about as you were talking about that too is, when you do hear from your unhappy people, you take that feedback and you can make it, you can be better from it, right? But then you truly have to want to be better from it, right?
Exactly.
And as a leader, sometimes ego gets in our way, right? It's kind of like, okay, well, we didn't meet the goals, or they're not happy, well, they can go somewhere else, type of thing, right? Instead of us truly digging into it, that okay, why are they not happy? Is there something that I could have done better to be a better leader to them, to help them lead the 90%, to help them leave the 90%, not lead the 90%, and help them be a better version of themselves, right? Because as leaders, sometimes we don't think from that perspective. We always think from a productivity perspective, right? How do we get them to produce more? How do we get them to produce more, instead of how do we get them to be a better version of themselves and live a better life? And
Absolutely.
important.
Yeah, if they're happy, they're going to produce. So it's really important that you understand why they're not happy at work and at home. But then I live what I preach, Tim. There's always going to be one or two, no matter what you do. But you also have to really, your ego, that is such a great thing you said there. You have to really keep your ego in check. No matter how hard you try, there's going to be one or two. But you got to get really good at looking at the person and being okay with one or two. And a great tool to add to the shepherding over the negative thoughts, a great tool to add is take that magnifying glass shaped shepherd stick, and when your ego is coming into the conversation, shepherd it over and say, am I fully present, kind, fully here in front of this person who is talking, or is my need to be right, again, my narcissism, my ego, is it coming into this conversation? Shepherd it over, spend some time the next morning and say, why do I need, what is the smallness in me? Because all that is a small, insecure fear. That's
Mhm.
all your ego is. So why are you small and insecure? Why do you need to be right? Why do you need to rule over? That's the greater, that's the thing you should build the theme on and get a ring on. Not how to be productive, how to be a full, rested, nourished, bright light in the room. That's what you should be working on. And as soon as you get those 10% personality defects in place, your business will soar.
It's definitely, listening to you is definitely a great way to start off the year for a lot of us. So, you know, if we could wrap this up in a bow and say give leaders and entrepreneurs like your top 5 tips in
Top
how
five
to
tips.
be a great leader, how to lead the 90%, what would you say that would be?
Sure. Okay. First tip is take care of the person in the mirror. We play martyr to our businesses. We play martyr to our, to the role of being a leader, and it makes us old and tired and overdone. So take a really good look in the mirror and say, what do I need to do, person in the mirror, to do the basics well, so that I am more rested, nourished, taken care of, so I can show up a full vessel. Then I would ask you to challenge how you see your own job as a leader and an entrepreneur. How do you think about it? How do you talk about it? Do words like we're crazy busy and it's ridiculously, that's not positive wording. So look at how you think and talk about your own work and your own entrepreneurial business and your own leadership role, because everyone's hearing you and they're echoing how you sound. So that would be number two. Number one, get you right. Number two, pay close attention to how you show up, the words, the thoughts, your whole energy. Thirdly, would be lead from a kind place. Take out a 90% magnifying glass that I call the compassionate, empathetic, understanding what connects us, what unites us, what makes us the same. See each team member through that. In a world, again, that demands inclusion, it's a non negotiable now. So that would be three. Number four would be don't let your negative customers win. There's always going to be one. There will be one that will rock your team, that will rock your business. Do not let them win, and be the example of what it looks like to recover with grace and dignity from a negative client experience, so that your team learns how to do it from you with grace and dignity. Put your team before your negative, horrible customer, and they will love you forever. And my last bit of advice is go home the same way you treat your best business client. You would never yell at your best business client. You would never come in the door and talk mean to them. Go home and be the same woman. Authentically be the same human in your. I'm not perfect. I yell at my kids. I nag my husband, of course. But you will not meet my husband, who will not say she does not have any bad days. I have bad half days, but I will spin that very quickly. So let the people at home see the same entrepreneurial leadership version of you that you are in the world. So that would be my top five.
Thank you so much for that top 5. I think I think your number 5, I think we can probably summarize into just be your authentic self, right?
Yes, please.
Don't be one person here and another person there. Be your authentic self so that the world can truly see the real you, right? It's
Because your kids' friends are watching you,
Mhm.
and your kids' friends go in the world and say what kind of people we are. And I
Absolutely.
take that really seriously. So yeah. Anyway, you and I could talk for a week. I'm super grateful, Tim. I'm writing a book for entrepreneurs next. So we'll have to get back together next year and talk about that book.
Awesome. And before you end, do you just want to take us through again the current books that you have, where we can buy them, and
Sure.
in touch base?
Sure. It was just on my website. I'm Darci with an I, so DARCILANG.com. All the books are on there. I've got two motivational, a woman's book and a leadership book. And yeah, I would be very blessed that you would post that. Thank you so much.
Great. Will do. Thank you so much for joining us today and for the valuable insights that you've given to our audience. Truly appreciate it. And let's take 2024 by the horns and just make sure that we rock it and you grow. And I have my focus growth as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Tim. Take care of you.
You as well.